The galaxy had always been vast and lonely for Era. She was an alien from a distant star system, part of a species known for their grace, intelligence, and overwhelming sense of solitude. Era's kind had evolved beyond the need for physical affection or emotional connection. Love was seen as a weakness, a flaw to be eradicated in the pursuit of knowledge and progress. But Era felt different. Everywhere she went, she saw the same thing, an endless expanse of emptiness. She had visited dozens of planets, studied their inhabitants, and shared brief moments with them. But it was always the same. There was no bond, no real connection. Just cold exchanges and fleeting experiences. She had seen love in a species she observed, humans most notably, but she never understood it. It seemed illogical, irrational, and yet it intrigued her. She had heard stories from the human explorers who had come across her species, and they always spoke about love in a way that made her heart ache with something she could never explain. It was a concept she couldn't comprehend, and yet it felt like it was missing from her life. It was on the edge of the galaxy, in a small outpost on the planet of Theloria, where she first saw him, a human. He stood at the edge of the settlement, staring out at the vast horizon as if lost in thought. His clothes were worn from travel, his face weathered, but there was something in his eyes that made Era pause. She had observed humans before, but never one like him. Its expression was a mix of exhaustion and hope, as though he had seen the horrors of war and the beauty of peace in his short life. He didn't fit the stereotype. Most humans she had encountered were brash, loud, and overly confident, but this one, there was a quiet sadness to him. Her curiosity got the better of her as she decided to approach him. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice soft yet curious. It was the first time she had spoken to a human in such a way. The man turned to look at her, his eyes scanning her alien form for a moment. "No," he replied, his voice steady but with a hint of weariness. "Just thinking." Era tilted her head. "About what?" He shrugged, a simple gesture that somehow conveyed so much. "I don't know," he said, almost to himself. "Life, the people I've met, the ones I've lost. I thought I'd be different by now. I thought I'd find something that mattered." His words resonated with something deep within Era. She didn't fully understand them, but they stirred something in her. For the first time in her life, she felt the pull of something she couldn't ignore. Was this emotion? "I can understand that," she said, though she wasn't sure why. The human looked at her again, this time studying her more carefully. "You're not like the others," he said, his tone laced with curiosity. "You're different." Era blinked in surprise. "How so?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I don't know. I guess you're the first alien I've met that doesn't seem to care about the galaxy's politics or what species is stronger. You actually seem like you care about things." She didn't know what to say. She had always thought of herself as a logical being, driven by knowledge and purpose. Yet here, standing in front of this human, she felt something she had never felt before, something deep and unfamiliar. "My name is Era," she said after a moment. "I am from the Exaltrian system." The man offered a small smile, a genuine one that made something stir in Era's chest. "I'm Jason, just Jason." They stood in silence for a while, the wind of the barren planet sweeping around them. It was a strange, quiet bond forming between them, one that neither of them could fully explain. Jason was different from the others she had met. He didn't seem to want anything from her, nor did he look at her with the usual awe that humans often reserve for her species. There was no reverence, no fear, no curiosity about her advanced knowledge. It was as if he saw her as just another being like himself. For the first time, Era felt like she wasn't alone. Jason had spoken of loss and the feeling of searching for something that mattered. She knew that feeling all too well. Perhaps that's why she couldn't pull herself away from him. She wasn't just fascinated by him. There was something deeper, something that whispered to her that maybe, just maybe, this human held the key to what she had been missing. Days passed, and Era found herself returning to that small outpost again and again just to see him. She would sit beside him as he worked, quietly observing the way his hands moved, the way he spoke with a strange tenderness to the locals. She began to understand that humans, despite their flaws, were capable of something that her species had long abandoned. They were capable of love, not just romantic love, but a deeper, more meaningful connection. A connection that could be forged in the face of adversity, of loss, of shared pain and joy. One evening, as the two of them watched the sun dip below the horizon, Era turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "Do you believe in love, Jason?" she asked, the words carrying more weight than she intended. Jason looked at her, his gaze thoughtful. "I used to think it was just a chemical reaction in the brain, something people believed in because they were lonely. But after everything I've seen, everything I've been through, I think love is what makes us human. It's what keeps us going when everything else falls apart." Era felt something shift within her. She had always thought of love as a weakness, an emotion to be suppressed. But here, in the presence of this human, she saw something different. Perhaps love wasn't just a flaw. Maybe it was a strength, a force that drove people to survive, to fight, to connect in ways that transcended logic. "I think you're right," she said quietly. Jason smiled softly, the sadness in his eyes lingering but now tempered with something else, something that mirrored the quiet hope Era had once lost. For the first time in her life, Era felt that she wasn't alone. The galaxy might have been vast and empty, but in this moment she understood that love, human love, was not just a thing of weakness. It was the very thing that made people strong. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was the thing that could make her strong too.